Good afternoon. I'm Angela Wilcox. I am a member of the Barrington 220 Board of Education.
I'm Brian Harris. I'm the Superintendent of Schools in Barrington 220.
The Board of Education, we decided to provide a number of informational sessions to explain to our constituents and community members some of the issues that we're confronting with the upcoming referendum that will be on the April ballot, as well as to answer any questions that you have concerning this referendum. We wanted to take a moment just to let you know that this session is truly just for informational purposes. By Illinois law, neither the superintendent or board members or any district staff is allowed to advocate either for or against this referendum. So we're here today to provide an opportunity for people who couldn't come to any of our open sessions, board meetings, or some of the nighttime informational sessions at the schools, an opportunity to write in and ask any questions that they have and get any extra information that they need to prepare them for their vote on April 2nd.
So we thought we'd begin here this afternoon with just doing a brief summary of the question at hand and then lead into hopefully a lot of questions and answers. We will be watching all of you as you log in and start to follow our conversation here today and be watching the questions, and we highly encourage you to post those questions into the feed. We will be reading them individually and probably toggle back and forth between Angela and myself and provide a dialogue and answering, and or also point you to the right direction where you can find the answers to specific questions or comments that you may have. I'm going to start here and jump in. This referendum was voted on by the Board of Education back in December to put a question on the April 2nd ballot. And at that time, the board had spent almost 2 years contemplating, working through a variety of items. We hired an architect, created a master facility plan, and put together many options for our board to consider on the question to put out to the community. It was not an easy decision by the board, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we get going here this afternoon. But I would like to take just a few minutes and discuss the actual results of that deliberation and engagement with the community, getting feedback more than once, trying to make those decisions on how we would move forward with this referendum. The question itself is whether or not the community would approve $185 million in bonds to work on capital projects. In our master facility plan, we identified over $600 million worth of projects. The board took a very conservative approach, knew that they had to get it down to a reasonable amount that the community could understand and also be able to be willing to support to provide those upgrades and renovations and additions to our buildings. Angela, anything else from the board perspective before we move into some of the details?
No, I'd say that we, as a board, decided to engage in a number of community surveys. So some of you may have received phone calls or internet surveys. And we also asked any volunteers to participate in a group referendum committee. We also had a number of individuals come to our board meetings and ask questions and explain what they felt their specific needs were in their specific schools.
So what the board did, they took 4 main priorities, and we'll kick it off with that, and then as questions start to come in, we'll probably toggle back and forth and fill in some blanks and be able to respond to some of those questions. First and foremost was to improve the safety and security of our schools. That is not only a local issue, that's a national issue, and our Board of Education has prioritized that, along with our community as we went through those feedback loops, and we knew that we have to update our schools to meet the current 2019 standards. We have many inside, outside of the building types of opportunities to improve, but one of the primary things was to get rid of our current mobile classrooms both at the middle school and elementary level.
That's right. I'd say that the elimination of mobiles definitely rose to the top of all community discussions, both at the board table, in board meetings, and in particular with the referendum committee. That really seemed to be a primary concern.
We do have one question here, so I don't want to keep Nick waiting. Nick, thank you for putting the question onto the feed. I'm just going to read the question, and then both of us will weigh in here as thoughts come to us. It It says, can you explain how this will be a project will be managed to keep it in budget and on time, and who and how? That is a great question. It is a large project. It is $185 million worth of projects in 12 of our schools. We will be working with a construction manager. We have done that in the past anytime we have had large capital large capital projects. Our board most recently has worked with Pepper Construction. I do anticipate our board moving forward and continuing that relationship. They have done outstanding work with us in the past and actually provided the cost estimates for these projects as we went through the master facility plan. As a construction manager, they will be consulting with us on a daily, weekly, monthly basis with staff as well as with the Board of Education to help us organize those projects and manage this, each of these, staging them at all of the schools. Obviously, it'll be their responsibility to work with us to make sure they're under budget, on time, and over the duration and the completion of this project.
Yeah, so as Dr. Harris mentioned, we have received estimates for these projects, but we certainly have not gone out to bid on any of them. So that will be a decision for the future board to put out RFPs and to look at the responses that come in and to make a very cost-conscious decision and to monitor closely to make sure that all of these projects are coming in on time and under budget, as Dr. Harris said.
All right, I did want to talk a little bit more about some of the priorities. I had mentioned the improving of the safety and security. We also, the board focused exclusively on updating our classrooms. In other words, to focus on our core business, which is educating kids. Clearly, we wanted to make sure that this isn't only a facility plan, but it's an educational facility plan, and making sure that we update our current classrooms to meet the needs of the students at this time. We've included in this budget additions to classroom space at every level. I had mentioned, previously that the mobile classrooms will be eliminated at the middle school level. We'll be adding 8 to 10 classrooms at both Prairie and Station to eliminate the mobile classrooms. At the elementary level, we do have some enrollment needs. We do have in the budget to add addition to one of our elementary buildings to be able to get rid of the mobiles at that level. Currently, those mobiles sit at Grove Elementary. We also have added additional classroom space for STEM instruction as well as sensory programming needs for our students with special needs. And we need to have appropriate spaces in each of those buildings, all 8 of our elementary schools, to meet those issues as well. Finally, at Barrington High School, we will be adding instructional space in the PE and wellness area. It's a significant need at that level. We have not increased the actual floor space inside the building since 1980, while adding over 1,000 kids to the student enrollment during that time.
Right. And since obviously the business of 220 is primarily to provide education for our children, I know that there are a lot of voters and constituents who have questions on this. So we encourage you, write in with any of your questions, in particular concerning the educational spaces that we're trying to create and enhance in our buildings.
I would encourage all viewers now, if you would like to put up questions. Certainly the benefit of Facebook Live is to have an interactive dialogue, not only for everybody watching at home, but also or in the office or on your phone or wherever you may be, to please post questions, and we would be more than happy to answer those as we go along. One of the other major components of the referendum is to maintain the community's investment in our schools. Nearly $60 million of the $185 will be to fix and repair plumbing, electrical, HVAC, roofs. It's basically the core of all of our buildings. We've had deferred maintenance over several years. In school districts, we do not have an annual operating budget to be able to meet those needs with 1.5 million square feet of space inside of our schools. We have to go out to the community to ask for permission to do these large capital renovations. Let's see if we have another question here. I think we do. It's from Lori. Lori, thank you for posting this question, and I'll just read it and then we will respond. I realize that North Barrington is one of the more recent schools built this year. Moving the music classroom to the cafeteria leads me to believe that we are getting close to running out of room. Are there any plans to expand North Barrington schools, especially if they want to make room for a STEM lab? Thanks. Do you want me to take that, Angela?
Oh, I can answer
Okay.
it. Yes, Lori, there are plans to build on to each of the elementary schools. So if you go to the Blueprint 220 website, there are some preliminary renderings for each of the schools. Now, this isn't necessarily an exact plan as far as how these extra space areas will be made. It could be that we may add on, extra space at one school and then, kind of create space in others, or it could be that we actually do build on at every single school. Again, this will be something that has to be bid out and looked at by the next Board of Education. However, we do have plans at North Barrington as well as all elementary schools.
Correct. And, it's not only for the STEM space. What we will do, we will work with the principal and the staff at each one of those schools, and we determine the right renovation or the right addition to make sure all of the programs. We've added those two scenarios. We know we had to create space, but we have to make it work within each school footprint.
Right. And as Brian mentions, obviously these are all school dependent, and definitely working with staff and the principals at each school, because most of our elementary schools are very, very different as far as their layout and their capacity.
All right. Here's another question from Sandy. What is the timeline to complete the improvements such as security and removal of the mobile classrooms, etc.? You want me to start?
I would just say, Sandy, I think that is at the top of our list. I mean, certainly safety and security is the primary goal of this referendum and really of this district. We have looked in many ways to increase the safety and security over our summer projects, as well as the way that we run the district by creating a new safety and security committee and definitely putting a primary focus on really shoring up the outsides and the insides of our building to protect our students and our staff.
As Angela said, you're absolutely right. Part of this too will be in the design process, and each building again is a little different. Some schools we might be able to move quicker in those safety and security things. Some of them might take a little bit longer, especially like Barrington High School, where we'll be making significant renovations to that building. We'll have to incorporate those safety and security features with that. Some of the newer buildings that were maybe built in the last 20 years, those we might be able to move a little quicker because they were built and designed in a different time, and we'll be able to quickly identify those issues and place them. One of the examples I've been using, for example, on the outside of the building is if you go to Walmart or Jewel or one of the big stores, you will see those large concrete pylons outside on the sidewalk in front of their storefront. Same thing in our schools. Our architects have recommended as a security measure to put those in front of our front doors so vehicles cannot come up on the sidewalk where kids are and where it's a huge security issue, dropping off students, whether with the bus traffic or car traffic, and that's just one of those outside and external enhancements we should be able to do pretty quick at most of our locations, unless there's major renovation going on at a particular site. So great question. One other thing I'll just add on a little bit too, I would say as superintendent, and certainly I'll be working with the board on this, the removal of the mobile classrooms at the middle school level clearly has to be one of the highest priorities. Those mobiles have been there since 2007. They were been used now for 12 years. We will start our 13th year in the fall, and they are beyond their expected life. And so we know we are a short time with those and hope we get the approval from the community to be able to make permanent additions at both of those buildings.
Right, and even for educational purposes with the mobiles, this year in particular, we had quite a few issues with them because it was so cold this winter. So we had a few days where we just couldn't warm up the mobiles and had to move children inside and kind of rearrange classroom space in order to provide a learning environment for them that wasn't freezing. So I think that is definitely a priority, and we'll move as close to the top of the list as possible. And we also want to suggest that if you are on your phones, you can tap comment and submit a question, and we can answer. You don't have to be at your computer. You can send in a question from your mobile device as well.
So keep those questions coming. That's what we're here for, to be able to respond and point you in that right direction. Allison has a question here. Are there any plans to expand the countryside parking lot? I'll let Angela, she's a former parent
I
at
will.
Countryside, be
As
happy
a
to explain that.
former parent of Countryside, I did not enjoy parking on Lake Cook Road to pick up my children. And there are plans. Now, I will say that we will have to make sure that we work with the county and IDOT to make sure that all of our renovations are acceptable, especially with ingress and egress off of major roads. But we do, and if you go to Blueprint 220, you can see some of the expansion plans for Countryside parking lot, as well as I mentioned, some of the ingress and egress out of that particular school. There are also a few other elementary schools that we're looking at changing the traffic patterns to increase safety, as well as the high school has quite a significant new plan to change the direction of traffic to eliminate the need to loop around the entire high school when picking up or leaving for events, so that there's more direct access in and out of the school.
I encourage you to go on our website and take a look at it. You can see the concept designs, and as Angela mentioned, we will have to work with the Village of Barrington Hills and on that particular project to make sure that we meet all the requirements for exiting and entering that property. Jeff has another question. What are the enrollment projections for the school district over the long term, 10 years or more? Outstanding question. Before we embarked on this 2 years ago, the Board of Education had used a demographer for many years, and we actually updated and upgraded our enrollment projections for the next 10 years. Over that period of time, we anticipate our enrollment staying flat. In other words, we don't see huge ups or downs in our enrollment. It does vary from year to year at each level. And enrollment patterns shift based on the real estate market and a variety of things. In those enrollment projections, we can only assume what it currently exists. We did not include in those enrollment projections like if there was a large new subdivision that would crop up in other parts of the district. So if something like that would happen, that would be a whole other conversation with the community about how to meet the needs of those additional students. So right now we're basing that on our current existing rooftops and the amount of students that we would anticipate over the coming years. So the quick answer is a flat enrollment. That's why we don't have any new schools as part of this. And in fact, the actual question indicates that the Board of Education can only renovate, update, add to existing facilities. We are not allowed to build a new school, for example. That is not part of the question, and so we will be restricted to keeping our current facilities in place and just improving them.
Mm-hmm. And we did look at a number of options, especially I think we started out with the primary interest of looking at whether or not it was economically feasible to build a third middle school. That's been an issue that's been discussed in Barrington for a number of years. And, while we did have a lot of interest in that, I think that as we went through the projections and looked at the budget, it just wasn't something that we could really manage to finance within the number that the board felt comfortable putting forward to the public in this referendum. It's interesting to look at some of the, home sales and where they're increasing and where they're decreasing and where they're staying flat. And we've definitely seen quite a bit of shifting, especially in our elementary school enrollment. Some of the schools that are in downtown Barrington are definitely seeing increases in enrollment, while some of the schools in other areas are seeing some decreases. So as Brian mentioned, though, overall that is still a flat enrollment, but we may need to look in the future as far as how to allocate some of those children and where they're attending. I think one other question that people had asked me as well is with the Hoffman Estates development, the potential of it. Have you looked at whether we should add new space? And as Brian mentioned, at this point, we haven't added to the or added additional buildings because we're not sure how that's going to play out. So we're watching that closely to see what that means for District 220, but that was not part of this referendum.
All right, we have another question here from Nick, and Nick says, do you think upgraded educational environments will allow the district to maintain and attract top educators? Nick, I think, again, the short answer is absolutely yes. Our school district tends to be a destination district, not only for parents and students, but also for educators. We do attract high quality candidates, and maintaining and keeping our facilities at a high level is part of that. It allows us to do amazing educational things in our classrooms and our programs. That attracts top talent. It's pretty simple. It's kind of like in the business world. Top companies and top manufacturers and successful businesses attract top talent. Same thing in the education field. When we have outstanding facilities, wonderful programs, excellent educational opportunities, we're going to attract the top tier educators.
Right, and that's definitely our focus is, drawing in and maintaining the best quality teachers that we can. And I think that District 220 has done a great job of that.
So Allison also has a question here. Is there somewhere we can go to look at how our current taxes are used in the school systems currently? Absolutely. There's actually several places you can go to do that. All of them on our website, and we've got a couple different locations. If you want to look specifically at the capital issues, on our referendum tab on our website, you will see the capital expenditures. That's what we're talking about today with the referendum dollars. But we do have an annual operating budget as well. And our annual operating budget is approximately $150 million a year. That is to pay our teachers and staff, keep our lights on, run our curriculum and programming, and maintain and operate our schools. So therefore, that is a separate budget. And if you want to go onto our website, we have our current budget posted. We have past budgets listed. All of our audits for this last several years are also posted there. We are actually in an outstanding fiscal position right now. We have had over 20 years of balanced budgets and never run a deficit on any of them, which has put us in a phenomenal position for this bond issuance if the community approves this. We are currently AAA bond rated, which means we would get the best interest rate possible in the bond market if we are allowed to go out and pursue these capital bonds to make these improvements. So if you have specific questions, Stacy, I'd be more than happy to follow up with you individually and point you to the right direction. In a nutshell, our current expenditures, approximately 75 to 80% of our expenditures are salaries and benefits for our employees. We have over 1,200 employees in our school district. That is very, very typical for any school system and how they manage their operating fund. About 10% is for purchase services, which is primarily food service, transportation, some professional development, some large sums of money that we spend for some of those operational needs. And then finally, very little of our money is discretionary in supplies and day-to-day management types of opportunities. So essentially that's our expenditure side, and we do manage that tightly. Our Board of Education is directly involved in those decisions, and we prioritize based on our goals and priorities for each and every year. Well, Angela, if you had anything to add to that.
I believe that there's a link to this website as well, but if you want kind of a breakdown or a pie chart as far as how the district spends its revenue, if you go to www.illinoisreportcard.com, that's a great resource as well outside of our own website.
Yeah, and that will show you a comparison with other districts and really show you how well we actually manage our resources to provide that high quality education for our students. Stacy has another question here. Again, thank you, Stacy, for putting that on there. It says a number of our sports programs will be positively impacted should the referendum pass. Will both the girls and the boys sports teams receive equal benefits with these changes? Yes. Obviously, we intend and we want to be able to do that, but we also are bound by Title IX. We have to, under federal law, and that's been in place since the 1970s, to make sure that boys and girls have equal access not only to the programs but to facilities. And we do an outstanding job in both boys and girls sports. And we would make sure that we provided those field renovations and additions and upgrades at Barrington High School to impact both programs. Let me give you an example. One of the programs that is brand new at Barrington High School over the last 2 years, which is lacrosse. Boys and girls lacrosse is one of the most popular interscholastic sport we have going on right now. 3 levels for boys and girls programs. The challenge has been for us, we don't have enough field space to be able to manage and provide an appropriate location for them. We want to be able to do that along with our girls soccer program, our track and field, boys and girls softball. So as part of this renovation and addition to the high school campus, we're adding 2 large turf multi-purpose surfaces to be able to meet the needs of those programs. And again, boys and girls evenly will be able to access those resources.
Correct. But a shout out to the girls' soccer team.
We're looking for that third state title, girls. All right, Morgan, thank you for adding the next question here. It says, many other high schools have very large auditorium fine arts centers. How will this improve, or how will improvements to the BHS auditorium benefit the entire community?
I think that's a great question, Morgan. I see this benefiting the community in many, many ways. You know, we have so many community events that rent out spaces, and we want them to come to Barrington High School to use our auditorium. Unfortunately, in the past, we haven't seen that always happen. My daughter, in particular, was a member of Barrington Children's Choir, and routinely they would go to Lake Zurich for their Barrington Children's Choir performances, which would provide a little bit of a head scratch for some of the grandparents who were coming into town. So, you know, we do hope that the community will be able to utilize this auditorium as well. And also, this is one of the large instructional spaces that are routinely used by teachers and educators in not only Barrington High School, but other schools in our district. So I think that it will have a lot of utilization.
I share this fact when we've had our open community meetings. That space, and in our district, not only at Barrington High School, but the entire district, is the most used space every day. 360 out of 365 days a year, that space is used by us for educational purposes, but also by community rentals and other purposes. It's used all year long, 2 and 3 times a day. It is a very, very popular space. We have outstanding programs in our fine arts, not only in performing arts, but in band, orchestra, choir. We clearly need an updated and more appropriate space to meet those programming needs, not only for Barrington High School, but for our community. And right now, that current facility was built in 1948. The original seats are there, the original equipment on the stage, the catwalks above the stage where we have students doing the lighting and the sound. It needs significant upgrading. We have a lot of workarounds in the current space. We want to be able to provide an appropriate facility to enhance those fine art programs in our schools as well as for our community. Allison has another question here. If the referendum passes and taxes go up, for how long will they increase? And can we expect to see them go down back down once renovations are complete? Thank you. Angela, do you want to start that, or do you want me to?
No, I would like you to.
All right, I will do that. So if the referendum passes, we had a very unique opportunity here to minimize the impact to taxpayers. We estimate on the median home in this community, which is around $500,000, the annual impact for the next 20 years would be $100 per year increase in that current tax bill. Now you might think $185 million, only a $100 impact, seems pretty small. The Board of Education knew that we had an amazing opportunity right here over the next 2 years to be able to present some capital needs to the community and to be able to take advantage of the current mortgage being paid off. Bonds that were issued 20 years ago in the late 1990s and early 2000s were used to renovate the Barrington High School at that time, to build 4 of our elementary schools, Rose, North Barrington, Roslyn, and Countryside. Those bonds are being paid off. So we have a window of opportunity here. Nearly $160 million worth of those bonds is actually rolling off the books in the next 2 years. So taxpayers would see a reduction in their tax bill if we do nothing. However, our capital needs are real. Our capital needs are in front of us. We've done the work to take a physical assessment of a building and also an educational assessment to see what is possible to maintain our education at a high level and make sure our facilities are at the same point. So the board knew that, so therefore $160 to $185 million debt would be a flat impact, and then the additional $25 million is where the $100 impact comes in on a current homeowner and a median home in our community. So to answer your question, it would be for 20 years. So it's like a home mortgage. After 20 years, our bonds would be paid off, and then the taxes would either go down, like in this case, or at that time, a Board of Education might choose to address additional capital needs that may be needed and appropriate at that time. So that is the way Illinois law is set up when you run public schools. We have an operating fund as a particular levy, and then we have a capital fund, and capital has to be asked for over periods of time. And that's what our Board of Education is prepared at this time for the community to weigh in on. Any other comments on that, Angela?
No, that was well said.
All right. Jeff, thank you for the next question. A total of these improvements is 185 over 20 years. If 185 million is the final total, what is the cost of these improvements over the next 20 years? I'm wondering if you're thinking that the annual or the actual cost with interest built in.
I think he's asking if interest is going to be built in. Or if it is built in our estimates.
Yeah, yes, interest is built into those estimates. So we would actually estimate a debt service payment of a little over $13 million a year for the next 20 years. We would build those bond payments to have an even impact for taxpayers over that period of time. We know that, and the board knows this, that taxpayers don't like when their tax bill fluctuates, whether it goes up and down and big jumps. That really confuses and upsets taxpayers. And as we have done in years right now, over the past 20 years, we'd like to keep that impact flat, and we would do exactly the same thing. We would actually sell those bonds over a 2 to 3 year period and be able to flatten out that impact on taxpayers. And we have built in an estimated interest rate. Now, interest rates are what they are. When we would go to market, we would have to make those decisions. As I said before, the good news is we're AAA bond rated. We're going to get the best rate that's out there, and we would competitively bid those bonds and look for an appropriate bond house to help us do that.
Yeah, I would say that I think that our estimates are conservative estimates and definitely looking at how interest rates could change over the next few years. So we tried to build that into our estimates. But again, we haven't gone out to bid on any of these projects. There could be some changes as far as what the actual numbers are. And, that'll be something that will have to be prioritized as far as how the projects are funded and which ones, kind of rise to the top.
One other thing, Jeff, if you have specific questions on that, feel free to contact me directly. I'd be happy to talk with you individually and walk through if you have specific questions. Jessie has the next question, and she says, will all mobile classrooms in the district be removed if the referendum passes? Please explain the safety issues with the mobiles.
Yes, I think that's a primary priority with the referendum is to remove all of the 3 mobiles. Now, it could be that those mobiles would be used on a very, very temporary basis in some of our schools while construction is being conducted. However, that's just so that instruction can continue during construction, but the final goal is to remove all mobiles from the Barrington 220 campuses. As far as how safety is impacted with having mobile classrooms, as educators and as administrators and board members, we've heard input from teachers and students that when they go to the mobiles, they're certainly walking outside of the classroom or the school, and when they need to go to the bathroom or come back in because they forgot something, there's exits and entrances to the school districts or to the school buildings, to provide this outdoor location. As Brian Harris has mentioned many times, this is somewhat inappropriate for a district of our caliber, and with all of the security measures that we're trying to take within the schools to provide this outdoor access to mobile classrooms starts to defeat some of those strides that we're taking. So that's why we have viewed this as one of the primary priorities of this referendum and really as the policy of our school district in general.
I see Allison has a little bit of a follow-up question to this, and I'll just jump on there. She says, as a first-time parent in the district, I'm not sure what a mobile classroom is. Great question. We don't want to assume that. Right now, at both of our middle schools, we have 8 classrooms that are not connected to the building. They are trailers on wheels. They have been there since 2007, both at Prairie and at Station. They're temporary units. Basically, they're not part of the school. They have no running water, no washrooms. They're heated in separate units. They're up above the ground, and so that's where Angela mentioned where there's challenges to keep them cool in the summer months and then obviously warm during the winter months. High wind issues are always a challenge for us because they are on wheels or on trailers. And they are intended to be temporary. And typically, the intended life of mobile units is around 10 years. The manufacturers will tell you that. We've been using them for 12. We're going to be using them for the 13th year this fall because we have not had a permanent solution for our middle schools because of the enrollment increase nearly 15 years ago. We currently also have mobile classrooms at Grove Elementary. Same type of thing. We have the 5th grade classes are currently in those mobile units at Grove. And again, we had an increase in enrollment, as Angela mentioned, in the village schools, Grove being one of those, where we've had a peak of enrollment, as well as programming needs in that particular building. And we knew we had to add those units to that site as well. Those are newer. Those were just put in this year. And she also mentioned we will probably use each of those units to the best of their ability if we are able to do this work and the community approves these bonds to do the capital work at each of our buildings. For instance, if we're doing major work at Barrington High School or at one of the elementaries, then we would move those mobiles over to that site while we're doing that transition for temporary purposes. So we're going to certainly use them to the best of our ability as we, hopefully get the opportunity to go through this plan and transform each of our buildings in the district.
I think Morgan has the next one.
Yeah, I see that, Morgan. You can read some of these if you'd like, or am I doing
happy
fine?
to read.
Go right ahead.
You read well, but I'm happy to read some too.
Have at it.
So Morgan asks, what are the potential implications to the school district if the now I should have had you, it just jumped, if the referendum does not pass? Great question, Morgan. So we would, as a board, working with the superintendent, we would just need to prioritize. We would have to look at the list of, things that we have targeted as needs for our district and prioritize those and try to work with the funds that we currently have to meet those needs. So obviously, as Dr. Harris had mentioned, we have an operating budget of $150 million a year, and the referendum is for $185 million. So, it's pretty clear that we wouldn't be able to tick away at $185 million in any short amount of time. But we would definitely look towards continuing to fund, capital improvement projects with our summer budget, which is about $2 to $2.5 million a year. And we would try to hit as many safety issues as we could within that budget. And obviously, if there are emergencies, we do keep our reserve fund at a certain level so that it could help us to in the case of an emergency or in the unfortunate situation where 2 years ago we had a bridge break at Barrington High School and we needed to repair that quickly. But the short answer is it won't be an easy process, and it definitely won't be a method to thoroughly address all of the issues that we have laid out as what we would like to fund through this referendum. Yeah,
the needs aren't going away. The issues aren't going to go away. We've got the plan. It's just a matter of when we do the plan. I think that if it doesn't pass the board, there are some significant consequences. Especially these deferred maintenance issues are going to start to pile up. We're going to have a lot more failures. For example, Prairie Middle School is 30 years old. The original equipment in that building for HVAC is in place. We have a significant line item to do the work in that site. It's time to do it. And we have to be able to update those facilities. I see Nick has a question here. If the referendum passes, when does the work start? Taking into account of rising bonds, RFPs, bid selections, when will the blueprint be fully implemented? Great question, Nick. If this passes, we will begin the work with our architects and engineers right away. We do anticipate all that design work is going to have to take place initially, probably for the first 6 to 8 months. The first major construction time will be in the summer of 2020. But we will start some of the other things more quickly, so possibly some of the safety and security measures, as well as replacing all of the furniture in our core classrooms across the district. That is one of the major instructional impacts that we determine as we work with our teachers across the district, and we need to, make sure that we try to prioritize those and get started as soon as possible.
Right, and to the extent that we can provide any of those security and safety upgrades, while school is while school is in progress, we will do that so that we can start to expedite some of those issues. So as Brian mentioned, some of those outside barriers and things like that, we can do those while school is still in session without, disrupting classroom spaces and stuff like that. But most of the construction will begin probably in 2020, and we'll try to complete as much during the summer months as we can to limit any disruption to students.
All right. There's Michelle has a question.
All right. Michelle says, the referendum shares the plans for the $185 million bond issue, but I know the district is also looking at alternative private funding sources for some of these and other projects. If, crossing fingers, private funding sources come through, how will you prioritize the now extra funds approved by voters? Oh, that's such a good question.
It is a good question. You want me to jump in on it?
Why don't you start, and then I have a few thoughts.
First and foremost, our Board of Education and staff, myself, would accept any private donations to upgrade our facilities. And we do have generous community members from time to time that do provide those type of funds to us for a particular project or a particular location in our district. We will work with any community member to provide or to implement those funds if they have a specific request or something that they would like to see enhanced. When the Board of Education set through on these plans, we would provide an adequate space or an appropriate environment for each of these, but we do get donations from time to time to help enhance it. Most recently, the Barrington High School Stadium is an example of that, where the district would provide an appropriate space. We've received community donations, advertising dollars, things like that, where we have enhanced that experience in that particular site. And by the way, there are no referendum dollars allocated for the stadium at this time. It's in great shape. Correct. And the district continues to maintain and do that. And we've been fortunate that way. How would we handle it? If we were to get private donations to help enhance or to add on to this, we have a long list of nearly $400 million worth of additional projects that the board reluctantly had to eliminate from this particular referendum. So the board would clearly try to prioritize some of those immediate needs, that are on that list, that were kind of on the short list or the last things off when we tried to identify those projects for this current bond issue.
Yeah, and I would say we've definitely had community members work with us in so many aspects of providing education through District 220, either from providing extra programming or extra social and emotional support to helping to feed children to, like Brian or Dr. Harris said, to, helping with the stadium and definitely providing huge improvements at our stadium. But, we've also had community members come forward asking specifically to donate for safety and security measures and any sort of extras that we've been looking at that really weren't able to fall within the parameters of what we're asking in this referendum. And we are happy to speak with you and, not only to expedite the implementation of some of these safety measures, but also just to add to them and increase some of the options that we have for the various schools.
Nick has another question. Was a third middle school contemplated in lieu of additions and renovations to existing buildings? Yes, it was. In fact, that was one of the discussion points we had at the board table. I'll share from my perspective. Angela probably would like to comment on that as well. Actually, a third middle school is part of the actual master facility plan. It was one of the options we considered. I think what the board landed after several meetings of discussion was it was about the budget. A new middle school was clearly going to cost us a significant amount of money and additional dollars. The board felt like the additions at this time to both Prairie and Station were a little more cost effective, allowing us to do additional projects at all of the other schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's well said. As far as, still looking at a third middle school, I mean, certainly if there was, an increase in the student enrollment, that would be something that we would need to look at. But I will say that since we decided to move in the direction of providing additions for both Station and Prairie, that's not really an option that we're looking to at this point. As Brian mentioned, that was something that was more of an alternative option where we would not provide those additions for those schools. But since we've decided that it's a more cost-effective and taxpayer-effective measure to move with the additions, I think that that's the focus currently.
Now, if we do have an increase in enrollment, as Angela mentioned, I think that's a conversation for a future board. Then we would
Correct.
certainly have to look at that. Because here's the reality of what goes on currently at Prairie and Station. Even with those additions, we are kind of maxing out our common areas, our hallways, our cafeterias, our lunchrooms, the library, the gym space. So we are maxing out the appropriate space on those sites. So if our enrollment would happen to creep up over the next several years, or if we had new subdivisions come into play, then we would definitely have to look at a third middle school option. Would that be a decision for a future board?
Mm-hmm. All right, what is next?
We got our
Sandy?
next question.
Or is it?
Yeah, Sandy.
Sandy. So Sandy asks, if overall district enrollment is flat and Grove's enrollment is up, thus needing mobiles, instead of spending money to add on to Grove, do you consider moving dual language out or shifting students to schools that have more capacity? Well, I think that we're always looking at how to best utilize
Every
our
year.
space. And that is something that the board has to discuss every year, especially when we're looking at, as I mentioned a while ago, enrollment increases in the village and enrollment decreases in some of the surrounding areas, such as Rose and Countryside has seen a little bit of a dip in enrollment as well. So those are constant conversations that we have to have, and they are not fun conversations. And I know that anytime the board or the administration looks at moving either programming or moving students in general, it's emotional, and so we definitely take this as a very serious conversation and look for community input wherever possible.
I did want to comment briefly on the specific part of the Sandy's question. Did we really consider moving dual language out of Grove? No. Dual language has been a program in that building now for many years. We manage our district programs, the Chinese immersion, the dual language, the extended self-contained at the elementary level, to have them balanced across all of our buildings, and also the bilingual program as well. So we balance those out. Every school in the district, elementary school, has some type of district program. And every school needs to have some ownership in one of those district programs, and that is currently where we are, and the board has not provided any additional direction, and staff has not recommended that we do make any changes. I will say this too, as Angela said, that is an exercise that occurs every so often in a school district. It is not an easy exercise to go through when you're talking about moving school boundaries or making adjustments based on enrollment, but it is something that has to happen periodically. We have no plans at this time to do that, but it is something that every board has to look at periodically over time.
Mm-hmm. All right, Michelle's next. Are you looking to augment the referendum dollars by selling any of the properties the district currently owns? Or do you intend to hold on to those spaces until a need may appear? Or is there a use for them within the current referendum plans, i.e. James Street, Kelsey Road, Woodland? That's that again. I think I say that's a good question for every question, but they are good questions. Brian, do you want to start, and then I'll add on?
I'm happy to. The Board of Education is constantly having these discussions about these properties. If you look on our master facility plan, we do have some ideas and thoughts for each one of those properties. Let's start with the Kelsey Road property. That is the identified site for a third middle school. So the board knew we've owned that property for nearly 15 years now, and knew that we had that as an option if the board chose to propose that to the community. And again, we did not do that as part of this referendum. But that property is available to us as a school site. Right now we do not have any plans there. However, one of the things that will have to occur, the buildings and grounds staff is currently housed at Barrington High School. And if this referendum passes, we are going to reorganize that entire campus. The buildings and grounds staff in the back of the building will have to leave that campus if we add on to Barrington High School and renovate that space. So we are going to have to find a new home for our buildings and grounds staff. We have a couple options. Actually, we probably have three options for them. One is we could build some type of a facility on the back of the property at Kelsey Road. We could move them to Woodland, which is one of the other locations here. Now, that's not always the best case scenario. Woodland is in the southwest corner of our district, and putting a district facility there would create a lot of additional windshield time for our buildings and grounds staff, which is just not real fiscally responsible. responsible. We'd lose a lot of labor time and hours, with our employees behind the wheel, getting to our facilities to work on maintenance issues. However, it is an option, and Woodland currently serves other purposes for us right now, primarily as a storage area, but we have constant conversations about the highest and best use of that property, including selling it. Same thing with the James Street facility where we actually are sitting right now. I think the community is very aware that we will be relocating the district office here within the next month or two over to the building directly across Barrington High School on Main Street. This building here is beyond its expected life. It has serious mechanical and physical issues. The board is currently in the process of considering what those options are at this time. Again, with this building, no additional programming or staff will be in this building. It is not appropriate. It is not acceptable. So we are going to have to make a decision on this particular property, whether we try to sell it or use it for an additional district purpose with a new facility on it. So this is a decision the new board is going to have to make, and we're looking forward to making the highest and best use of all of our assets across the district. Anything to add to that, Angela?
No, we do routinely make some jokes about James Street. We don't mean to, but it is hot. It is really hot in here.
The reason why is because this facility, the mechanical issues in this building are extremely challenging. And to do this Facebook Live session, we had to turn off the blower, and we don't have any outside air blowing in the entire building, not only in this room, but the entire building. Again, antiquated mechanicals in this building, and it does create some significant challenges for us. So the expected use of this building will be done as soon as the district office staff vacate this in the next 2 months. So we have about 10 minutes left. Right now I do not see any additional questions. If anybody has any others that they would like to post on the Facebook Live screen, we'd be more than happy to chime in on them. I would like to just take a minute and comment a little more about the actual impact to taxpayers. We haven't talked a lot about that here. Okay. We did mention that for a $500,000 house, the annual impact would be $100 per year for the next 20 years, and that would be a flat scenario, and we would issue bonds accordingly. But one of the most important things, I think, for the community to be aware of, and I encourage you to go to our referendum page, is to take a look at the current tax rate in this community that we spend and we levy as a school district for K-12 education. Our tax rate currently is the lowest in the western, northwest, and north suburban area of any and all districts that we compare ourselves to. I want to commend our Board of Educations over the last 20 to 25 years for keeping that rate low and using the funds effectively to provide a high quality of education. And other districts have higher tax rates. Some people might ask periodically, well, why don't you save up money to do some of these things? Our community and our board has chosen not to do that. Some districts do it. They collect a higher rate, and then they store it up, and then they actually construct or renovate or add on to buildings in their districts with those dollars out of their operating fund. We don't do that. Our operating fund is to run the day-to-day education that goes on in our schools each and every day. So when our board in the past has always chose to go out to the community when we have capital needs and issues and let the community weigh in at that particular time. I think David, thank you for the compliment here. It says, you guys are doing great. Watched your whole stream. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully we answered some questions for you. Angela, do you have any closing comments from your perspective or things we haven't been asked?
No, I think we have two additional Facebook Live sessions, and we hope that if we didn't get a chance to answer your questions or if you just didn't get a chance to send them in, please join us then. I think that the next one is on Monday,
Tuesday.
Is it? Oh, it's Tuesday?
That's not here.
That's
Tuesday, 7 p.m. Brian Battle, our board president, and Penny Casimir, our board vice president, will be right here in these two seats. Mm-hmm. They will have the same opportunity for community members to weigh in and ask questions at that time as well.
Right. So you can always email any board members or Dr. Harris. We're happy to pick up the phone, have a conversation if you have any questions specifically. But I'd say more than anything, just vote. Vote on April 2nd. It's going to be an important time to get out and and voice your opinion at the ballot box. So thanks for tuning in today.
And again, also, I want to encourage community members to go to our website. That is probably the #1 best source for information. If you go down the left-hand side of our website, you will see several tabs. And on those tabs, you will see a diagram for every school in our district and the actual projects that have been identified in the $185 million bond issue. Those are concepts. We haven't done the design work, but what you can see in the detailed description of each one of those projects and what's going to actually happen over the next 3.5 to 4 years if we are given permission by the community to do it. All the financial information is on that website as well. There are several videos in each one of those priority areas that we talked about. Great videos with our staff, board members are in there, talks about each of those high priority areas and some of the specific needs in each of our schools. Encourage you to look at those videos. And finally, there is an ask a question box. If you can't find it, or if something just comes upon you and you aren't able to locate the right information, one of our staff is on the other end of that ask a question. Craig Winkleman, our Assistant Superintendent for Operations, will get right back to you within 24 hours or less and either point you in the right direction or provide the answer to your question. So I encourage you to use that opportunity.
There's also a lot of great resources on that website as well that go back to the beginning of this process, when we went through each of the schools and interviewed teachers and students and walked through the buildings and took sound decibel recordings to see, how much interference there was in each of the classrooms from other classrooms. And we looked at the space requirements, the average space allocated per student in a typical Illinois school. And you can see reports on every single school from where we started this process, which kind of helps you to frame up your analysis of what we're proposing when you look at the anticipated renderings that would come out of a referendum.
Karen, thank you for your comment as well. We have had success and luck with this before. I know people have busy lives, and we look forward to the opportunity to dialogue face to face. But also, this virtual format works for a lot of people to become informed. And as Angela said, I would highly encourage our community to go to the polls on April 2nd and weigh in on this question. The Board of Education has put in front of you. We want to continue to provide those excellent opportunities in our schools, and updating our facilities is part of that. And hopefully we've provided some details here and information for you to be able to be an informed voter on April 2nd. Unless there's any other questions, which I do not see, I think our time in this session is wrapping up. Angela, any final comments?
No, I just thank you for watching. We have a great community full of really involved parents, community members that don't have children in the school districts, as well as students. So thank you for all of you for coming to the Board of Education meetings, voicing your opinions, and for supporting this district. It is a very important part of our Barrington community.
Thanks again, and again, if you'd like another opportunity to engage on Facebook, that's next Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Thank you.
Thanks.